All right, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the National Jazz Museum in Harlem. How many is it your very first time? How many of you very first time here? Okay, wonderful. Thank you for coming. Thank you for coming out on a rainy night, on a busy night. I hear the roads are horrible today with all the presidential mumbo jumbo in town, and the subways are funny. So thank you for making the effort coming out. And for you that are back here for the second or third or 20th time, thanks for coming back and hanging out with us. The National Jazz Museum in Harlem presents over 150 public programs a year. Almost all of those are free and open to the public. Those of you who did choose to make a donation today on your way in, we greatly appreciate it. We do have a little cash box that's strategically placed right by the exit, so we make it very easy in case you would like to make a small donation on your way out. You can also visit our website, JMIH, and we try to make it easy for donations there as well. You can also sign up for our email newsletter, and that's the easiest way to keep in touch with us as far as our programs. We send out a really nice, brief, succinct email once a week letting you know what's coming up over the next few weeks here at the museum. And that's the easiest way. You can also follow us on social media. We're easy to find, National Jazz Museum in Harlem. Let's see, what else do I have to share with you? There are a number of large events coming up for us this spring. International Jazz Day on April 30th is one of those. We'll be making an announcement shortly about the bands that are going to be featured. And then we also have in June coming our Juneteenth Black Music and Dance Festival. That'll be in year 5. So those are two of our bigger programs that we present every year, and we'd love to have you join us for any of those. Tonight, we do a lot of partnerships. Anybody who works in nonprofits knows that partnerships are essential, but partnerships are not always easy. They don't always just come together magically and happen. This one did, and it's been going for a number of years. The partnership with Columbia University and the Zuckerman Institute has allowed us to take a look at the intersection between music and jazz in particular and how the human brain works. And I've learned a tremendous amount over the years. This has to be our, 10th or 12th, sometime we should count how many of these we've done. Everyone is different because we bring together a musician and a neuroscientist, and they get a chance to bounce ideas off of each other and talk about the relationship between music and the research that the neuroscientist is doing. It's a fantastic opportunity for us to learn more about how music impacts our bodies and our minds. And we're going to get things going tonight. We're going to start out with some music, and I want to introduce our band leader for the night. Saxophonist, band leader, had a long history and legacy in partnership with the great NEA jazz master Randy Weston, has toured the world many times sharing his gift of music. Please welcome Mr. T.K. Blue.
All right. How's everybody doing? Okay, please welcome the great pianist right here to my right, Mr. James Austin. Okay, and we're going to open up with a song. Before I do, I just want to quickly make a couple of announcements. First, I want to thank the Jazz Foundation of America. They helped to produce these series. Also, I want a special thank you to Kent Cantor and the Zuckerman Institute at Columbia University, and of course the Jazz Museum. And us as musicians, we always have music for sale. If anybody's interested, we have some CDs. I know nobody buys CDs anymore. They're dinosaurs. But every now and then, you never know. And we're going to have a very interesting program in conjunction with the Zuckerman Institute. And we're going to start off with a composition. This is going to demonstrate, quite often jazz musicians, when we record standards, we want to put our own personal signature, because there's a lot of jazz standards. A jazz standard is a song, a popular song, could come from Broadway, could come from the composition of a jazz musician like Duke Ellington, Count Basie, Charlie Parker, Coltrane, any of these songs that many musicians record, and they become jazz standards. And but when you record a jazz standard, you want to put your own personality, your own twist on it. So we're going to do a song that's pretty popular. I think many of you probably have heard it before. It's by Duke Ellington. I'm not going to tell you the title. You can tell me the title. But it's by Duke Ellington. And then we're going to just play a snippet of it the way it was recorded. And then we're going to put our personal twist on it. And let's see what happens. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. Anybody know the name of that song? Yes. Absolutely, Sentimental Mood. And any comments about the two different versions you just heard? Anything in particular that struck you, or it's traditionally been played as a ballad, but I hear it in a different way. Hear it more up tempo, and it's a little yes.
Well, you changed the time signature to 3/4 feel.
Changed the.
The time signature to 3/4 feel.
Yes, exactly. Went to
And then you had the tag at the end.
a little vamp at the end.
At the end.
Yeah. So what that does, it puts it gives more of a personal twist to a standard. So everybody wants to hear Sentimental Mood as a ballad. They can just put on Duke Ellington's record. But if they want to hear it 3/4 in a waltz tempo, up tempo, then they got to put on my record. So that's how we do, how we change things up. And I'm going to now. I'd like to bring on a young man who's a student at the Zuckerman Institute at Columbia, and he's doing some incredible research dealing with sequencing and patterns, and then also unexpected twists and turns, things that go on in our brain. Please welcome Mr. Abhishek Shah.
Cool. Yeah, whatever you're ready, TK. All right. First of all, thanks for that amazing performance. Appreciate it. But yeah, so I want to talk just a little bit generally about the type of work that I do as a neuroscientist before we get into a little bit of a conversation on what we just heard and how it might relate to some of the stuff that we're studying in the brain. But yeah, I'm Abhi. I'm a third-year PhD student right now at the Zuckerman Institute at Columbia. And I work with Professors Attila Lashansi and Stefano Fusi, who do two very different things. Attila is an experimentalist, so we actually do experiments on living animals. In my case, we use mice to study the brain, and we try and figure out what's going on with the neurons, which are the cells in the brain. On the other hand, Stefano, who's my other advisor, is a theorist. His background's actually in physics. So he uses computational models and math in order to understand what's going on in the brain. And so I use both of these perspectives in order to really figure out what's going on, how we're able to think, and how we're able to form, specifically how we're able to form memories and learn things. And I do all this by looking at one specific region in the brain called the hippocampus. So has anybody in the crowd heard about the hippocampus before? Is that a term? Yeah? Yeah? And so the hippocampus is this region in the brain that we know is really, really important for learning and memory. And it's really important for the types of memory that you probably think of when you think about memory. When you think about memory, what probably comes to mind is I can remember what I ate for breakfast today, and I can remember the act of eating breakfast, or I can remember taking the train here and getting off the train and walking down that sidewalk. Those types of memories, the types where we can remember where we were, what we were doing, and when it happened, those are called episodic memories. And the hippocampus is really important for those types of memories. Episodic. Yeah. So we know the hippocampus is really important for those types of memories. But it's really unclear, actually, what's going on within the hippocampus in the patterns of activity of all these neurons in order to support memory. Why do you need all these? What are these neurons actually doing in order to create memory? And there are tons and tons of different theories about why the hippocampus might be necessary in order to create memories. And it doesn't have to just be like a hard drive. It isn't just storing the memories. There could be many things it's doing in order to make it easier to store memories. But I want to understand that, and the way that I do it is I actually have tools that allow me to zap single neurons in the brain to turn them on and off. And so I can control the activity of just a few neurons, and I can also read out the activity of, let's say, maybe 1,000 or 2,000 neurons in the mouse, in the hippocampus, as it's doing behaviors, actually, as these mice are learning things. And so I'm able to go in and probe how these cells are actually talking to each other. Keep in mind the way that the brain works is that you have a bunch of neurons and they fire off electrical signals and they talk to each other, right? It's a network. And so what I can do is I can hit single cells, and what I'm interested in is seeing if I hit one cell, how do the other cells light up around it? I'm interested in seeing how cells in the hippocampus talk to each other, because what I believe is that by understanding the underlying structure and connectivity and the way the neurons talk to each other, I can sort of read out the conversation. I can understand what computations might be going on in the brain in order to support memory and learning. But yeah, when we think about what you just did, which was to play something and then put it in a totally different context, right? I think the first thing is when you hear your variations, when you shift the context, first of all, the first thing you notice right off the bat is the tempo is different, right? And that shifts the sort of context you're in. That's similar to the stuff that we do actually in lab, because we too put the mice in one context, have them learn some sort of task, and then we're very interested in what happens when the mice move to a new context, when you switch things up on them. And we also, are interested in things like sequences and patterns. So that's another thing. When you listen to the variations or TK's take on In a Sentimental Mood, there are patterns in the standard that show up in what TK does with it, right? And you can recognize those things. If you played the second one, you would still probably be able to say, oh, that sounds like In a Sentimental Mood. One example of that might be the chord changes. Obviously, played around with that a little bit. But also the melody, right? There are motifs that pop out as well. And you can recognize those patterns. You can also recognize the sequences. You can recognize how things are put together, right, piece by piece, in an order. That's something that we also think the hippocampus is important for, actually, for saying this comes after this, and, this note is related to this note in some way. We know that the hippocampus is also important for that. Yet it still is also important for memory. It does all these different functions. That's why it's a very mysterious part of the brain. It does tons of things that we think are very special for cognition, for the various ways that we think, and the various things that are important, the processes that are important for us as humans in order for us to be able to understand the world. The hippocampus seems to do all these things. So we really want to understand that at its core, is there one big overarching function that the hippocampus is responsible that feed into all these different things, or are there many different functions that are shared among all these different cells in the hippocampus? So yeah, do you have any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. Yeah, I was just fascinated what you were saying, and I'm thinking, for example, in the hippocampus. Okay, so if you got off the train if you came here for the first time, you're not even from New York, you've never been here. You got off the train at 125th, and I walked you up to the museum, walked over to Up Lenox, made a right at 129th. I'm pretty sure all of you could repeat that. You remember, 125th Street, get off, walk up. But how about muscle memory? That's what I'm always fascinated. For example, if somebody shows me a new piece of music and they want me to memorize it, I have to go over it many times with my fingers and fingering the notes so that my brain will remember these patterns.
Mm-hmm.
Is that in the hippocampus as well?
Actually, that's a good point, because it's the opposite. If you think about the hippocampus, what it's really also important for is something that we call one-shot learning. What that means is, as humans, and to a certain extent mice too, definitely like primates, like monkeys, primates, monkeys, humans, what we're able to do is, within a single exposure to something, we can learn it, right? If I tell you to do a task or something, or if I teach you that something's associated with something else, you can learn that within a single trial. And memories, you have to experience them once, and you can remember that. We take that for granted, but that's very tough. If you have if you're trying to train a dog or something, right? If you're trying to train your dog to do to shake your paw, to shake paws with you or something, that takes a lot of work, right? For a lot of animals, it's very tough to be able to very quickly learn something. To build associations, it takes trials and trials, sort of like muscle memory, right? But it seems like the hippocampus is really important for this sort of ability to take knowledge you already know, structural knowledge we'll call this. People also call it latent knowledge. The underlying structure of the world around us, and to apply that into new situations. So for example, I might know the general structure of a block in New York, right? I know, if I go east, I'll go towards the East River. If I go west, I'll go towards Hudson. If I go north, I'll go uptown. I can go downtown. I know the general structure. And so if you tell me how to navigate somewhere, I can very quickly do that, because I know the general rules that govern walking around New York, right? We think that the hippocampus is very important for that, for creating the structure of the world that we can then use to apply and to very quickly learn things. Because if we didn't have that, then everything we do would be completely new. We'd have taken all this complex sensory information and do muscle memory with it, which you can't do for every task, right? And that's why muscle memory is tough. But humans can learn many things very quickly. So they're two different processes. And actually, muscle memory is probably not within the hippocampus.
It's not, yeah. Because I find what's very interesting in music, one of my teachers, Frank West, he had a saying, he used to say, TK, when you practice, practice slow. If you practice fast, it goes in fast and comes out fast. In other words, he's saying if you practice slow, certain intricate musical passages, and you practice slow and then slowly you increase the tempo, eventually you're going to get it right where you want it. But if you start trying to learn that new passage really quick, and because the tempo's fast, and you're going to be flubbing and you're going to say, "Oh man, I can't." So you gotta slow it down and repetitive motion, because what happens in the hands, I guess your brain remembers these fingerings, these repetitive motions. So I think that's. Any questions from anybody about anything that? Don't be shy, because this is a great opportunity, especially to talk to scientists and also to musicians, because quite often when we perform, we don't have an opportunity to talk. We're just there to play. But now you can get some of the inside track. Yes, you were here. Use the mic.
First of all, thank you so much for incredible performance, and thank you so much for your information. I have a question. Approximately 2 years ago, I met one woman with dementia, and as you said, she couldn't remember certain things, but she was pianist and teacher, and she could teach it. And she didn't forget it. That's why it's very interesting, this muscle memory. Can you a little bit talk about it?
Actually, yeah, what you raised is a good point, which is what you described is what we call anterograde amnesia, where it's tough for you to make new memories, but you can remember things from the past, right? And that's something we think is actually very related to the hippocampus. If your hippocampus gets damaged, or during dementia, it's one of the first places that actually starts degrading. You lose your ability to make new memories, but you can remember all your old memories. So it's important for forming things, but not necessarily fully for recalling memories. But yeah, when it comes to in muscle memory and all those things, those aren't stored in the those are stored in other places in the brain, whether that's your cerebellum or your motor cortex, which are just different places. And those actually don't undergo damage first during dementia and Alzheimer's. Those are actually some of the later parts of the brain to start degrading. Which is why, oftentimes musicians, late into life, if you develop dementia or any sort, you just get old, you don't lose your ability to play often because it's so ingrained, right? It's just like you don't lose your ability to walk usually, right? Or open a door, because it's a task you've done so much that it becomes second nature to you. And it moves to a different place in the brain, one that isn't affected as much.
You have any other questions? So what we're gonna do now, I think we're gonna keep moving. Ari was talking about sequences and patterns, and one of the things I want to mention, we're gonna play now a song, is how jazz musicians use sequence in their improvisation, and which I like to call spontaneous composition. And so what we're gonna do, we're gonna take a song, and we're gonna play this song. I'm gonna play a pattern that'll fit perfectly through the song, because as musicians, what we do sometimes is we learn sequencing and we learn patterns that we can draw from our memory really quick. Because when you're playing a song and the tempo is 1 2 1 2 3 4 1 2 3 4 1 2 3, you don't have a lot of time to think about what you're going to play when you have this moving harmonic structure going on. So sometimes you work out pre-existing patterns and stuff, but then other times you throw all that away and you just create. So we're going to do, now this is an interesting song we're going to do for you, because this is another example of how jazz musicians survived in America. Because what happens in music is when you, for example, when I record a standard song, say, for example, a song like by Gershwin, I Got Rhythm. I got rhythm, I got rhythm. Who can ask for anything more? Standard song. So if I record that song, George Gershwin's family and his heirs, they're going to receive publishing money for that song, because that's his composition. But if I take the same harmony that George Gershwin used for I Got Rhythm and I put my own melody on it, then that's something different. That's a new song. One thing, a little sidetrack that some of you may not know, in music, you can't copyright, you can't own harmony. You can copyright melody, but you cannot copyright harmony. So what a lot of jazz musicians started doing in the 40s, they would take pre-existing jazz standards. Many of them came from Broadway shows. And they used the same song, but they used the same harmony, but they created their own melody. And they were able to do this legally and call it their own song. And that way, when they recorded it, they were able to reap some of the royalties and some of the benefits. So we're going to do something similar. And so we're going to take that song I just told you, I Got Rhythm. We're going to use that harmony, but we're going to play a melody that was composed by Thelonious Monk called Rhythming. After which I'm going to play 2 choruses. The first chorus I'm going to solo. I'm going to use a pattern. You'll hear it. It's going to be very distinguishable. And then the second chorus, I'm going to abandon that and just create. Can anybody hear some of the, how we did like that first solo I was playing, but it was a little pattern. You can, and these patterns can be sequence. Sequence is when you play the same pattern in different keys and you go along. And then we abandon it and just create it. So this is done quite a bit in jazz. And one other thing, too, I want to mention that's very interesting is sometimes you can take a standard that you put your own twist on it, and it becomes a bigger standard than the one that you got it from. And I give an example of that, and that's I'm in the Mood for Love. I'm in the Mood for Love was an old popular song. I'm in the mood for love simply because you're near me. Do, 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 do. I'm in the mood for love. James Moody came along. He recorded that song, but he didn't want to play that melody because he thought it was corny. He said, I'm going to play my own melody. He used the same harmony. So Moody said, do 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 do, boo do 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 de boo de boo be da, boo boo do 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 de do de da do. He played his own melody, and it was so beautiful. Eddie Jefferson wrote lyrics to his melody called Moody's Mood for Love. There I go, there I go, there I go, simply because you're near me, my heart's, you know, I don't know the lyrics, all of them, but anyway, Moody recorded that, and it became a big hit, bigger than I'm in the Mood for Love. And Moody, he of course received a lot of royalties for his original version. Let's have Abby come back now and talk a little bit more about his research in sequencing and unanticipated turns and twists.
Cool. Thanks, TK. Yeah, so with what you just played, you know, you improv at the end, right? So you played the original version, and then you played a version that was one that you were making on the fly, one where you were taking patterns and sort of inverting them, right? And so, again, one thing that I talked about already was the importance of the hippocampus, this region I talked to you already about, the importance of the hippocampus in pattern recognition and in novelty. And so I wonder if anybody in the audience, when you started going into the second version, when you were sort of a little bit more free in your improvisation, not sticking to those original patterns, if anybody, you know, felt anything, did you recognize that? Was there a moment that you felt? That's okay if not, but some people? Yeah, the audience, yeah. Yeah, so you can feel when TK sort of took it a different way. And part of that is TK set up patterns initially, the first time he played things. And then, you know, the second run through, those patterns weren't there, and you were expecting those patterns. And so we know the hippocampus is important for this. Maybe not for recognizing this, but for responding to novelty. Because think of it this way. If you see something that's new, right, that isn't in line with what you expect, that isn't in line with the patterns that you've already set up in your brain, that's important, right? Think if we can take the basic example of a mouse or something, right? If the mouse knows every time that it runs into its burrow, it's safe, you know, that's great. But the second it goes into its burrow and suddenly there's some sort of bird or something sitting in there, right? That's going to be something that's very salient that the mouse has to realize it and know and form a memory about. And so the hippocampus actually gets lots of signals that say, hey, this is a novel experience. This is something that you haven't experienced before. It might be a good idea to pay attention to it and maybe form some memories. To basically go into overdrive. So we know that's one thing that happens in the hippocampus when it comes to pattern recognition and responding to novelty. But also, you know, there was an overarching structure in your piece. And this doesn't necessarily have to do with the improv per se. I think for that, too, the hippocampus is very important. And we talked about this already, that, you know, for the individual notes, maybe it's not as important to have the hippocampus there, that you can, you know, just use muscle memory to work your way through. But for improv, you couldn't just muscle memory your way through improv. You could to a certain extent. But there's a certain aspect of knowing the overarching structure that you're aiming for, right? Because there's still a structure, right, when you're improvising? Yeah. You still got the chords going on underneath. You still have a direction that you want to take things. And so we know that the hippocampus is really important for this, for the general structure of for basically taking a set of experiences that you have and saying, this is part of concept A, this is part of concept B. You can think of it when you're going through the chords, you know, maybe your 2 is encoded in the hippocampus, and then your 5 is encoded in the hippocampus, and the 1 is something else. 2-5-1 is like a standard chord progression that you do in jazz. But, you know, these sorts of general structures that you're following, we know those are represented to a certain extent in the hippocampus, and the hippocampus is important for putting these together. But then it's like sort of you pull out the general concept, and then you send that information to the rest of the brain, and then the brain does its magic, and you get everything else you need. And so I wonder, I don't know if there's been research done on this, if like later in life, or if you develop dementia as a musician, as a jazz musician, if you lose your ability to improv a bit. I don't know if you know anecdotally or anything, if you have any friends who got old, and were still able to play standards or something, but they couldn't improv as well. Is that something you've heard?
Yeah, sometimes I've seen that. But what's interesting too is that because the musical landscape is so vast, from practicing all your life as a musician, even when you have some physical disabilities or challenges as you get older, mental or physical, you still, I think, will be able to navigate to play something that's pretty cool. And I know musicians, in fact, personally, I know musicians who are now going through some challenges, health challenges, mental health challenges. But when they pick up their instrument, you don't hear it. It's very interesting. You don't hear it at all. It's almost like that part of the brain that controls the music, it's not affected. But the interesting thing is they'll play something incredible, and after that, they'll say, okay, the next song, they'll announce the same song they just played, because their memory, they have issues with their memory, but not with the music, which I think is interesting.
I wanted to share something. I met the great trumpet player, Tom Harrell, and he has some kind of yeah, he's got lots of stuff going on, and so he's a very tall man. He's a great player, and he's kind of stooped over like that, and he doesn't talk. He's kind of real introverted, kind of like Bill Evans when he's playing the piano. But when then he gets up on stage, he comes alive like a god and plays this magnificent music. So that's what I thought of when you said that it just totally brought him out, and his spine, everything unravels, and then he becomes like this whole other dimension of himself.
I don't know him personally, but I know Tom Harrell's music. And Tom Harrell is a prime example. He's an incredible musician, incredible composer. I play "Sail Away," which is one of his songs. That's definitely true. But the other thing too that I find, which is quite fascinating, is just this muscle memory scenario that we were just talking about with Abby, and how is it that what I find is quite interesting is that I know there's musicians where you only show them a new piece of music once. I've played with musicians where I've written some hard stuff. In fact, I'm reading it, and I look over, and the guy that I gave it to, he's not even reading it. It's like he played it once. So, and I've heard this term used, photographic memory, where he looked at this piece of music and it made an imprint in his brain, and he was able to draw from that imprint and play that piece without looking at the music quite perfectly. And I'm always fascinated by musicians that can do that. To look at something one time and they got it, So I'm always wondering in their brain how does that work? I mean, they have some special. Is it a special gift, or is it the neurons are able to, I don't know, pass faster within the network? I mean, it's just fascinating to me when I.
Yeah, I have no idea actually about photographic memory, about what that looks like in the brain. I don't know if anybody actually knows right now, but there's multiple things it could be. It could be actually something where it's like you are able to understand the concepts like that you see and sort of reconstruct what you see. But I think photographic memory generally is very much like you can see exactly what you just saw a couple minutes ago, and we don't actually know like why that's the case for some people. And for most people,
it's definitely a gift. I mean, in fact, talking about Columbia University, there's jazz station WKCR at Columbia. They had a gentleman, he passed away a couple of years ago. He was a dear friend, and he was an iconic figure, Phil Schaap. Everybody, Phil Schaap. Yeah, give Phil a big hand. I've known Phil for many. In fact, I met Phil when I was in college. And he was only a couple of years older than me. And I remember I was on a gig, and it was about 20 musicians. And Phil came up to me. He said, "Yeah, my name is Phil Schaap. I'm going to be the MC tonight." I said, "Great." He said, "Who's playing?" I said, well, want me to write it down? He said, no, just tell me. I said, okay. Well, so I told him about 20 names. And he said, great, okay. And then we took a break. And then, but an hour later, we get ready to play. And he got on the mic, and he called everybody's name. Perfect. And you know, when you listen to his show, and he's saying, yes, and Charlie Parker back in 1943, he traveled up to so-and-so, and he recorded with so, and he's not reading anything. All of this is from that memory.
One time Dizzy Gillespie said that he knew what Dizzy said. They were friendly also. He said that Phil knew more about what I was thinking in 1948 than what than I remember.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
He studied it so much.
Yes.
Yeah, I had a question about the brain and awareness and presence, and this is with regard to.
Here, use the mic so everybody.
Hi, thanks so much. My question was about the brain and its relation to presence and awareness. And I'm bringing this back to the earlier discussion about sequencing and patterning. So from what I can gather, there is a presence and awareness that's almost a meta presence when one is sequencing and patterning deliberately. And then that presence and awareness, that meta-awareness, seems to dissolve or evaporate when there's a release of some kind in order to do of that presence and awareness. So I wonder where does that presence and go when, well, one is, what is the presence that is articulating that patterning and sequencing deliberately? And then where does that presence go?
So, so you're saying like when you perform, that sort of goes away, you're saying?
Right.
Yeah, I mean, some people would say that it doesn't go away, that you're still thinking when you're performing, right? That there's still, I remember when I was like, I was always told to actually think very explicitly about what I was playing when I was growing up in terms of like keeping my brain on and not checking out, and to think of overarching like what I was trying to do. So, I mean, I think that depends actually on the performance side. But there is, there's people talk about like a flow state, right? Where it's like you get into doing something and you stop thinking about it and it just sort of comes naturally. I don't know if there's that much like neuroscientific background about that, or whether that's just sort of like more like a pop science term that sort of came about. But it certainly is true that sometimes thinking too hard about something can mess you up. And there's multiple reasons for that. That might just be that there's some pattern of activity that's going on in your brain. And if you think too hard, if you're doing too much, there's like a limited capability for you to pay attention. Right? And so then maybe some of your brain power gets diverted, and the circuits that you might be using to perform, the circuits that normally just sort of play out what you have in your brain, are getting sort of, there's too much going on, right? It's actually very difficult for us to multitask efficiently without actually just switching between many different things. So I think that's part of it, which is that checking out in that way, where you're no longer thinking about other things and you're just thinking about one specific thing, can be very productive. But yeah, I'm not sure about what the neuroscience of that really looks like. I think all we really know is that it's hard to pay attention to more than just one or two things at once. It's really, really difficult.
Yes.
So I'm wondering if you have studied anything about how musical memories can unlock memories from earlier in life. And people talk about how music is just this key that can unlock memories, and when people hear music from their childhood, their body can do things that they couldn't have done, like catatonic people in nursing homes can dance, and people can remember memories and faces that they could, but music as a trigger. Have you done any studies on that?
Yes, I mean, I haven't personally done studies on that, but what we do know is things that are particularly emotive make things easier to remember, right? So it's really easy with music because music is it's very emotionally driven, right? And we seem to be able to very easily pick up emotion in music. For whatever reason, there's many theories for that. But because of that, any sort of memory that you form in association with with music is going to be pretty strong often. And it's just an easier way to recall than to think about something specific. Another example of this is actually odors. Odors are very good. So if you smell something, it's very easy for you to remember where you were when you first smelled that, or you get a really strong sense of nostalgia often, and that's because there's actually a reason for that for odors, which is that they're more directly hooked up to the rest of the brain compared to other senses. Your nose, your ability to smell things. But for music, I think it's probably that whenever you listen to music, it's generally pretty emotive. And because there's that emotional valence attached to music, it makes the memories that are surrounding that music a lot more salient and a lot easier to remember.
You know, also, I think we can't forget that there is a definitely a spiritual connection with music. There's some things that we can't explain in science, and we can't explain in terms of musical terms. Music is a sacred art. Think about it. You can't touch it, you can't see it, you can't smell it, but you feel it. And for example, we can play something, we're gonna play something now to close out, and all you will be tapping your foot. It brings us all together. I've experienced sometimes playing some music, and all of a sudden I'm outside of my body. I don't even feel my fingers. I'm not even thinking I'm just in another zone. And then I come back, and I mean, because music can open up this portal. It can allow us to travel. It can allow us to go back in time when you speak about certain memories. And it can allow us to communicate with our ancestors. And I've experienced that. I've played some music for a friend of mine who's like my uncle. He was a dear friend who passed away, and I could feel him in the room. I could feel him next to me. I could hear him. I could feel his presence. It was so real. I started crying. It was funny. I was playing this tune, and I started crying. People, audience was like, what's going on? Because, you know, but the music is deeply spiritual, too. That's another thing that we can never forget when we play this art form. Various styles of music, came into being because of various scenarios. Here we have jazz. We have Africans who were brought to America, who had to navigate and negotiate in a new land under the auspices of a very horrific system of slavery. And what did they do? Out of that, they created beauty. They created this music, and the music allowed them to survive. So music is, just like in Africa. I traveled to Africa quite a bit. In Africa, music is an essential element of society, especially traditional society. I'm not talking about the major cities, because then you're going to find what you find here. But if you go into the country, then you're going to find some traditional music, and everybody participates. There's no audience. You're either dancing, you're singing, you're clapping, you're playing something. There's nobody sitting there waiting for the end and then they go clap, clap. No, it's not. That's not how it is. So we can't ever forget that aspect. I think we're running out of time. We have time. Somebody had a question over here. We have one more question. Somebody have a question in the back? Let's do one more question, and then we're going to play another song for you.
Thank you so much. I have questions. I'm a very curious person.
Question
for both of you. So you say that you write songs. Yeah, you write songs. Yeah, it's very interesting for me. I was always wondering what happens inside you when you're writing music, from the side of you as musician, and from maybe your opinion about it. What happens there in brain?
When I'm playing.
Yeah, and when you write music.
Writing.
Composing, and what happens inside you, and what would you explain it?
Abby, you go first.
Well, maybe you should go first to talk about what you feel. Yeah.
The thing what makes interesting, what makes composing a little bit different from what we're doing now in terms of playing a song and then spontaneous composition or improvisation. When you're composing, you have an opportunity to edit and change everything before you record the song. So I'm at the piano. I got a melody. I'm finding some chords. Nah, I don't like that. Nah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. Nah, I go through that. Oh, I need to change this. No, let me change this. No. So I go through this whole process. And once it's finished and I play it from start to finish, got it. Now we go to record. But when we're improvising, we're actually doing that same thing, but we don't have the luxury to edit because you guys are sitting right here, we're playing. I can't play a phrase and say, oh, I'm sorry, y'all, I didn't mean to play that. I want to play something else. No, once I play it, it's out there. So that's spontaneous composition. And I'm sure, I have no doubt, I don't know if Abby knows, he might know, but I have no doubt that there's different parts of the brain that deal with those two different, I don't think it's the same part of the brain we're dealing with when you sit down to compose as opposed to improvising. I think there's some other stuff going on. Maybe you can explain a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, in terms of being creative and coming up with things, actually, it's like a lot of musicians will tell you that they're most productive, late at night, right before they go to bed, after they wanted to go to bed. We know this, that like when you're close to sleep, for whatever reason, you're able to come up with things a lot easier. So there's many theories as to why. One theory is that you lose a lot of your sort of ability to clamp down on thoughts, and sort of a lot of things bubble up, and there's no filtering that goes on. And so I think like improv, it's the same thing. It's sort of unlocking that state of creativity, of just sort of being able to hear a lot of things immediately. Which again, for some people they can do that all the time. Other people, it's only certain times of the day or certain times. So it depends on the way they're feeling. Composing certainly is very different, right?
No, definitely. And the other thing too, the last thing I want to mention too about improvisation, because we use this term quite loosely, and for lay people who are not musicians, many think that when we improvise, we're just making up things on the spot, whatever comes to our head, and that's not totally true. What I'm trying to say is that improvisation requires tremendous study. A lot of people think it's just something you just make up, and it's no. We talk about sequencing and patterns and repetitive motion, and you have to use a lot of that as a musician. You practice scales, you practice chords, you practice arpeggios, you practice, all kind of stuff, and it's just like how we learn the alphabet when we were a baby. We learned the alphabet. We learned a word here, word, and then as we get older, when we start talking. When we start talking, I'm not thinking about A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I learned that when I was a kid. So now I'm just talking. I'm drawing on that knowledge, and it's the same thing with improvisation. We go through all of the rudiments, and we practice. A lot of it is repetitive motion. Playing certain things. Anytime I have a passage of music that's difficult, I go over it slow and just keep over and over until it finally starts to get, and I try to speed it up a little bit by little, and then eventually I'll be able to get it at tempo. But it takes practice. It takes practice. I think we're about at the end of our time slot. We're gonna two things. We're gonna close out with a song. And this is an example of, there's a very famous song written by Sonny Rollins called St. Thomas. We're going to play just that, a snippet of that melody. But that song inspired me to create my own song. Because Sonny Rollins is from the Caribbean, Virgin Islands. And my mother's from Trinidad, my father's from Jamaica. So I have that Caribbean heritage as well, even though I was born in New York City. And so I was inspired by hearing Sonny Rollins' song, St. Thomas, to compose my own composition called The Caribbean Express. One, two, Thank you very much. And, again, I want to thank so much Abby Shah for being here. To James Austin. My name is TK Blue, and just want to mention a couple things. Please fill out the survey. I think you get a survey, a link for the music on the brain. So we'd love to hear about your feedback. And also, don't forget to tell a lot of your friends. There'll be another one here next month featuring a great pianist, Helen Song. And I'll be back in May to do another series of this. Also, please go to my website, tkblue.com. There's a lot of things happening in April for Jazz Appreciation Month. In fact, I will be performing a week from this Sunday on April the 7th down in the Village at the Zinc Bar. We're doing a tribute to the great NEA jazz master, Dr. Randy Weston, who this year would have turned 98. So we're going to honor him all this month at the Zinc Bar. We're going to in Pittsburgh, also in Washington, D.C., for the NEA Jazz Masters Award Ceremony. We're going to perform there as well. And also, I'm very excited to be going to Africa, to Tangier, Morocco, for the International Jazz Day on April the 30th with the Herbie Hancock Institute. So it's going to be very nice. I'm really looking forward to that. So please, thank you so much for coming out, and we really appreciate you tremendously. And please support the Jazz Museum of Harlem. They do tremendous work for the community. They do a lot of educational programs on jazz for kids and for students. And they're just an organization that we really need to support. So please support them as best as you can. God bless you all. Get home safe.